Before we continue further, I would like to request your attention to some administrative matters. The next slide, please. Yes. I would like to request all attendees' cameras and microphones be muted during the webinar, and there will be a video and audio recording of this forum. Please use the Q&A chat function to comment or post your questions for the panel discussion or for our presenters. We will be circulating the slides deck to the participants after this forum. Thank you. So without further ado, I shall now start the webinar. And today we are very privileged to have Ms. Teresa Goh, Governing Council member of the Singapore Institute of Directors, as well as Dr. Fermin Diaz, Deputy CEO of the National Council of Social Services, sharing their insights for the first part of this webinar. After that, this will be followed by an interactive panel discussion moderated by Mr. Kison Lee, Head of Center for Nonprofit Leadership. So I shall now pass over the mic to Teresa for her to take over for her presentation. Over to you, Teresa.
Okay, thank you, Jensen, and good afternoon to everyone who's attending. Thank you for having me. I would like to start my talk by doing a poll. So the question I'm asking everyone who's attending now, do you think that anyone can make it onto the board of charities? Is this statement true or false? Arthur, can you launch a poll? Yes, so if everyone can either choose a true or a false answer. So what do we have as a result of the poll?
Okay, we have 13% saying true, 88% saying false.
Oh, so do you have the results of the poll? Can it be shown?
Share results.
Yeah. So 13 of you say it's true that anyone can make it to the board of charities, and 88% of you say that it's false. Interesting. Well, technically, anyone can make it to the board of directors. Yeah, there is no regulation that says you need a certain criteria to join a board of charity. There are lots of guidance as to who would be the best board directors of charities, but there is nothing stopping anyone from making it to the board of charities. Yeah? Except for those who have liability. So Terry Cole, you have given a good point. Except for those who have a record of bankruptcy. Yes, but even then, if charity boards do not make that due diligence, even the bankrupts can get onto the board unless somebody blow a whistle. Yeah, so technically there isn't. Yeah, which is why we do have many cases of fraudulent directors who get discovered only after the fact. Okay, so technically, yeah, and I will share my own story with you. I got into the board of charities without any experience as a director. So 12 years ago, I was invited to volunteer with NBPC, and my role then was to give advice on the board match program. So I joined as a volunteer. I was just driven by passion. Yeah, I was interested in helping NBPC place directors into charity boards. And that was something I was good at in my day job. Yeah, so I was invited as a volunteer. And I volunteered passionately for about 6 months. 6 months later, I put in a paper to say that board match alone would not cut it. We have to spin out board match as a separate company and call it something else. Yeah. 6 months after I volunteered, I was invited to join the board of the new company. And the new company became known as Center for Nonprofit Leadership. So 1 year into being a board member for CNPL, I was asked to be the vice chair. And 1 year after I became the vice chair, I became the chair. So technically, 2.5 years after I volunteered, I became the chair of Center for Nonprofit Leadership. I could have been a bankrupt. Nobody would know that because I don't declare it. There isn't anything in the public media. Yeah, it's basically who I know. I got in as a volunteer. I just basically gave it a lot of my passion and my effort. The results were produced. I got invited to the board, and then I got invited to be an office bearer. So technically, anyone can make it to the board. But I was very, very passionate about the cause. Yeah, and even though I didn't have any experience, I self-learned. Yeah, at that time, there was no SID providing the SCOOT program. At that time, there was no CNPL providing training because we just started CNPL. At that time, SSI was also very new. There was no way you could pick up any skills. Yeah, so literally, I navigated on my own. Okay, so I am an example of a board member who contributed positively to the charity. Yeah, because of my passion. Now, can you imagine if anyone can make it to the board of charities and these people do not make an effort to develop themselves, what would be the state of charities? Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is passion alone, is it enough? Okay, can you move to the next chart? So how do I define passion? Yeah, I like this definition by Simon Sinek. He says that working hard for something we don't care about is called stress. Working hard for something we love is called passion. And yes, indeed, 11 years ago when I became a board member of CNPL, I was very, very passionate. I spent more time on CNPL than I spent with my own company. Yeah, I was in CNPL 5 days a week, literally just having meetings, recruiting new board members because I was chair of the nominations committee. And I was even developing programs and training materials for CNPL. Right, if you don't call that passion, I don't know what you call it, yeah? So when I became the board member, the responsibility became a lot more. It wasn't just a volunteer anymore, yeah? And because I was chairing the nominations committee, the responsibility fell on me to form the new board, yeah? Now, is passion alone enough? Definitely not, yeah? Passion is just energy, it's just emotions. It's a good feeling about what you're doing. Yeah, and if we don't go in depth into passion, it will just be a high one day, a low another day. Yeah. So what made the difference? Next chart, please. The difference is combining passion with a purpose. Yeah. So purpose is the reason you journey. Passion is the fire that lights your way. So I was filled with a lot of passion when I started CNPL, but it wasn't going to carry me through with the rest of the board members. We had to create a purpose. Yeah. And at that point in time, I still remember we had several board meetings in order to determine that the passion at that point in time was to nurture effective, committed, and passionate leaders for the nonprofit sector. And I always remember these 3 words because it stands for ECP. Yeah, effective, committed, and passionate leaders. Yeah, so because of that passion, that was a collective reason for the board to work together. And of course, we started hiring our first headcount, second headcount, third headcount. Now, you might notice that I mentioned board first, then management. Yes, the board was rolling up their sleeves. We were all rolling up our sleeves and working for CNPL. Then we hired the first person and the second person and the third person. So a startup board in particular requires not just passion, yeah, it requires a lot of passion, yeah, but also a purpose. Now, for the large charities, in comparison, I would say the purpose would be larger than the passion, yeah. And of course, if the charities have both in the greatest amount, that would be the ideal situation. Yeah, so when we had a purpose, we could go out there and engage the public sector to get funding. We engaged the private sector to get funding. So many banks came to fund our program. We were 70% self-funding and only 30% of the money came from the ministry, and it was channeled through MVPC. Yeah, and we wanted to stay that way, yeah, for the first few years. Because we wanted to be independent in the way we go about crafting our mission and our strategies. Yeah, and we already had an understanding that at that point in time, come a day when we need more funding and we're not able to do it, we will go back to NVPC. Yeah, and we had a choice then. Yeah, so my message here is passion is not enough. You must have a purpose. Next chart, please. Now, is purpose and passion enough? No way, yeah? Your purpose must actually be concretized into results, yeah? So purpose and action equals results. And what do I mean by action? Now, purpose is something very enduring, very, very future forward, you know, something that lasts even beyond your lifetime, yeah? Which means purposeful boards will leave a legacy for other boards to take on, yeah? Because our obligations to the beneficiary doesn't last 3, 6, or 9 years, which is the term limits for most boards, 10 years, yeah? So our obligations to our beneficiary last beyond 10 years, yeah? So our purpose has to last beyond that. So it's important that our purpose gets cascaded down to mission, vision, strategy, and ultimately into programs and operational activities. And that's what we mean by action, yeah? Now, in today's context, as far as I know, many charities are measured on KPIs, yeah? So as board members, we have to ask ourselves, what constitute our results? Would it be just numerical numbers, the number of people we serve? Or would it be the outcomes? Yeah, and my next chart will elaborate a bit more on that. Yeah, are we chasing output or outcomes or impact? Yeah, when I talk about outcomes, I am referring to the fact that by the things we do and the way we serve, we want to change the behaviors of our beneficiary so that they are empowered to look after themselves as well. And for those who cannot, who else can we empower to look after them effectively? And of course, impact is really about changing lives, yeah, and not just the number of people that we serve. So what's my point here? My point here is that your passion can carry you to the point of producing output. It can also bring you to the point of chasing after outcomes, or it can bring you to the point of creating impact. And if you're able to create outcomes and impacts, you are really generating value for the community. Yeah. So what I'm talking about is a lot of passion and enduring purpose, and also the knowledge, the understanding, the capability to produce actions that create meaningful results to our beneficiaries. Yeah. So the end point I'm gunning for really is collective impact. So while you can achieve impact for yourself, for your teams, for your organization, to what extent are you achieving impact for the sector and even for the country? Yeah. So where does your passion lie? How far does your purpose go? Yeah. How far does your purpose go? If your purpose is about the sector, then you would be engaging a community larger than just your own organization. or your own beneficiaries. You will also be engaging with other SSAs, whether they are in the same sector as you or whether they're not in the same subsector as you, because we are serving the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries might need more than what you are able to service. So for example, when I was chairing SATA ComHealth and I went to a SATA Cares activity, we went to a rented flat, and in that flat was an old lady because SATA Cares targeted elderly. So we went to find out about the well-being of the old lady. She was 85 years old. Yeah, so when we went into that flat, it was a rented flat. The floor was very dirty. It was unwashed for weeks. I could see mold on the floor. This old lady was ironing some clothes. She was very, very cheerful. Now, next to her was a 50-plus-year-old son, very fat, very sad looking. His body was all bruised. He suffered from schizophrenia. He suffered from mental health issues. He was under depression and a lot of medication. And I looked at him and I said, "How are you?" And he said, "I am in depression. My wife has left me. I have no more reason to live." Now, next to him were two very young girls, less than 10 years old. They were staring onto a TV. The TV was half functioning. And these two girls were not even going to school. And I look at my SATA colleagues and I say, this old lady needs more than just clinical or social care. She needs somebody to look after her son. She needs somebody to look after her two granddaughters. We need a holistic approach. Yeah, and it means us going out to 10 other partners and say, how can we help this family? Yeah, so really collective impact goes beyond just your organizational results. And once you get out there to the external world, it's a lot of effort to establish relationship and trust. Yeah, because everybody is driven by different KPIs. Yeah, so it is very important and you need to be skillful. Yeah, which means the director development is very important. Yeah, to establish the trust and be skillful enough to decide what programs your organization can service versus another organization, and also understand what responsible stewardship is. It is not about competing with another SSB. It is really about collaborating so that you can maximum impact. It's also not about duplicating the work you do versus other SSBs. Yeah, and also being a responsible board member, it's about results and accountability. Yeah, for every dollar that the public has given, how much am I creating real value? So I'm not talking about duplicating a service that somebody else can do better. I'm not talking about over-servicing. I'm also not talking about under-servicing. Yeah, I'm talking about creating real value. Next chart, please. So ultimately, what sort of a board do you want to be? Do you want to be a board just governed by passion? Or do you want to be something else? So I've created a simple chart. If you are a board just guided by very high passion but very low competency, that's all you are. You are a passionate board. Lots and lots of positive energy. Yeah. If you're a board with low passion and low competency, you are just a half-hearted board. A lukewarm board will not achieve anything. If you have high competency but very low passion, you are but a contented board. Yeah, and our beneficiaries deserve more. However, if you have high passion and high competency, you will become an effective board. Not just that, you will become an effective, committed, and passionate board, ECP, which is what CNPL started out to do. Yeah, so with that, I will pass you on to Fermin to persuade you on how you can be an effective board. Thank you. Over to you, Fermin.
Thank you, Teresa. And welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this topic of how do we strengthen board leadership? How do we create better competency for good governance? And I want to share some ideas with all of you that hopefully you can give some feedback on the chat about some of the things that I think boards can start to do in a proactive way, because I think, the truth of the matter is that without strong boards, we won't have a strong sector. If we want to have a strong nonprofit sector, if we want to have a strong social service sector, we need strong boards. And strong boards require good competency. And this is one of the points that I want to emphasize. So what does that mean? If we look at the CMPL, board leadership study, the 1920 study, there are three key things that are important. One is, how do we recruit better? How do we get better board members? And how do we not only get better board members, but board members that really are going to deliver on what is needed. Boards that think that the role of the board is perfunctory, or that is a rubber stamp, or that it's just a fundraising sort of arm, well, that's different. But the boards that really want to make sure that we have optimal way to function, and that the services that the organization is intended to deliver are delivered to the maximum ability of the organization, will need to have different skill sets on the board. And you really need to be recruiting for skills and for competencies, and not just to fill seats with friends. The second one is, how do we not only gain sustainability as an organization, but how do we make sure that that sustainability gets translated into better delivery of services? In the for-profit sector, it's easy to measure success. We measure success by talking about profit and talking about revenue growth. And everybody in the organization understands that there are two key metrics by which we measure everything. In the nonprofit world, we have a complicated life in that it's not so easy to determine what everybody is there to do. However, this is one thing the board should continue to insist on. What is it? What are the 2, 1, 3 key things that the entire organization is there to do? Is it about being able to deliver more services? Is it about being able to deliver more quality of service? Is it about being able to cover a greater amount of the needed population, or population that needs the help? What exactly is it that the organization not just stands for? That's usually in the missions and values, but what is it that the organization is trying to achieve? How would you know as a board if the organization has achieved its success? How do you measure success? And that's a key and important thing. So, because if we want to measure sustainability, you can't just measure sustainability by the amount of reserves that you have in the bank. You need to measure sustainability by the amount of service and the quality of that service that you provide with the resources that you have at hand. And then the third thing I think is quite important is this dynamic between the board and management. It's common to see issues between the board and management. From the management side, what it looks like is, why is the board always interfering? Why is the board give me accountability, and they give me basically freedom to, say, hire people or spend money, but then they want to check on everything, and they want to sign every single check, and then they want to approve every single hire that I make. From the board's point of view, it's usually a more complicated story. It's usually around the fact that, well, our management team maybe doesn't quite get it, and they don't do always what we think, and so we need to intervene because maybe we don't have the right people in place, which is quite an interesting story, because the board is the one that should be hiring the right people in place. And it's not for the board to be managing the organization. It's for management to be managing the organization and for the board to provide guidance. I think many boards get caught in the trap of, we don't want to spend too much money for senior executives. And at the same time, we then go into, well, our people are not good enough. It's a catch-22, if you know what I mean. So what to do about it? I think we need to tackle this problem from 3 points of view: from the individuals that are on boards, from the organizations, and as a sector. So what should we do as individuals on boards, or what should happen in terms of individuals on boards? Well, part of it is going to be around how do we get the right people? How do we get the right people should be about ensuring that everyone that joins your board is clear about what it is they're expected to do. Maybe we should make it a point that nobody joins your board until they've been on a committee first. Maybe we make it a point that nobody joins your board that hasn't been trained in, say, do you want to be an MPO director or Essentials or S-Good program. Maybe you want to make sure that nobody is allowed to join the board that hasn't been onboarded properly, not just into your organization, but into the whole sector. And particularly, you should be sure that you don't recruit anybody that isn't there to fulfill a specific need that your board has. All boards will have needs around a few key items: services, accounting and auditing, risk, human resources, nominations, remuneration, and fundraising. These are all key elements of, and perhaps even volunteering. These are all key elements of every board. So it is correct to first bring people onto a committee that then can join the board, because they learn about the company, they learn about the organization, and they learn about what is required. Plus, you also get to see them in their particular area of expertise to see if they have added value with their advice. Otherwise, just be clear of the kinds of skills that are required at your board. And your board may be thinking even beyond what I just said into IT, innovation, and other things. How do you ensure, maybe lawyers, how do you ensure that you know what each seat of the board is intended to be for, and that you have the required skills with each seat of the board? So be very purposeful about who you hire. This will get us into two additional points. One is training. How do we train everybody, not just before they join, but after they join? How do we make sure that they understand the sector well? How do we make sure that they have clarity around how funding works? Who are the different funders? How do we capitalize on money? But also things like, how do our reserves get ring-fenced, and what can they be used for or not? When should we use them? There are lots of issues that I think are important for board members to be continuously trained on how the sector works. And the better trained they are, the better they will function. Now, of course, I've heard it before. They say, well, you know, our board members are volunteers. We can't really impose on their time. But at the same time, I've heard board members tell me, I wish I got more training. I would have been better at it. I would have understood better what was required of me. I would have contributed more. So the second part is, when it relates to individuals, is making sure that you also internally have clarity around things like strategic plans, how everybody can contribute to your strategic plans, and also to your succession plans. Your succession plans must be quite clear. I mean, there's usually some perfunctory succession plan in every organization that basically says, oh, and the VP becomes then the next chair. That's great. But who becomes the next VP? How does that happen? How are we training people? How are we developing people to be prepared to take the next role while they're VPs? And in particular, how do we prepare anybody who's not the VP to become a VP? What exactly needs to happen? So they need to be trained not just on the sector, but they need to be trained on the internal workings of the organization. This is all quite important and must be done quite deliberately. In corporate world, this is done because there is a nominations committee. The nominations committee looks after the well-being of the board. We don't have such a thing, and maybe we should. Maybe we should clearly appoint that there is a nominations and remuneration and HR committee, perhaps, that looks after not just the HR practices of the organization, but also the HR practices of the board. One other point that I think it's important here is, how do you raise awareness among your existing board members of the importance of doing this? Hopefully, during your board retreats, you can have a great sense of two things. One, yes, you need to develop strategy during your board retreats, and that everybody on the board should be knowledgeable about what strategy looks like and the process of building strategy is like. But the second one is also a sense of how, as a board, we can function more effectively to be able to provide the right advice. So every board retreat should have two parts. One is the strategy of the organization moving forward, but the second one is the ability of the board to work well as a team. What else is important? I think it's important that when we do all of this recruiting, that you change a little bit of where you find board members. The typical way to find board members is friends of friends. Nothing wrong with friends of friends, but there's a lot more out there of people with the passion, with the right skills, and the willingness to help that we could tap into. So there's all kinds of professional organizations, the government itself, CMPL, ourselves here at NCSS, lots of places where you can go looking for additional board members beyond just your network. Another point that I think it's important is, how are you using your patrons? If your patrons are only really there for show, okay, but you're not really maximizing the use of your patrons. I think it's important to bring your patrons at least once or twice a year to talk about board functioning, and to talk about board roles, and to talk about how is the board helping the organization to achieve its objectives. I think it's quite important to choose the right patrons that can also be our advisors as a board member, as a board. How do we bring them to talk to us? And if your current patron is not able to do that for whatever reason, is it possible for your board to bring an outside person that can give you good advice on how to strengthen the functioning of your board? Then another point I want to make is about tools. There are 2 or 3 key tools that every board should avail themselves of and use consistently. We talked already about orientation plans. How is it that you're going to onboard every new board member onto the organization, onto the functioning of the board, and onto the sector? You also should have a very well-defined succession plan that looks out at least for the entire board term. So not just for the next 2 years, but perhaps for the next 6. As to who is going to go where, how is it going to happen, and what kind of skills are required when this goes. Do you have any potential people that you've already started to look at? And you should start looking at potential people years in advance, not months in advance, because you clearly know when terms are up and when people should be replaced. The third part I think is quite important that every board member understands, we also talked about it already, is how to develop strategic plans and how to be a good advisor to management on the strategy that the organization should pursue moving forward. And lastly, I think another tool that every board should use consistently is a board assessment. A board assessment is a fantastic way for the board to know how well they are doing and what else do they need to be doing. It's also a good way to gauge if the relationship between the board and management is where it should be, or do we need to work on it. This type of board assessment should be done no less than every 2 years, ideally every year, but no less than every 2 years. And it should be openly discussed with all members of the board, perhaps all members of the different committees, and all members of management, so that we can have absolute certainty that the board is doing the best it can at every single point in time to do better. And then the last thing I wanted to say is about the code of governance itself. I mean, the code of governance, we all know, tends to be comply or explain. There was a review done a couple of years back. There's a review coming up soon, but there's nothing that stops any charity from implementing governance that is tighter than what the code recommends. Now, you're going to say, why would I do that? Well, actually, a lot of organizations do that. If you look at, again, on the corporate side, what SGX has tends to also be very much comply or explain. Many organizations go beyond what is required in the listing requirements to implement their own sense of governance and compliance. There's no reason why our boards couldn't do that. No reason why our boards couldn't have better governance or higher requirements and governance on things like how long people should stay, governance also around making sure that every skill that is required is attended to, make sure that we have governance around how much training each board member should receive on a yearly basis. So there's all kinds of things, even board diversity, all kinds of things that as a board, you can decide to set a higher level of governance than the one required by the council, by the code of governance. So I actually strongly encourage you to do that. The more you do that, the better your funders feel about your board and the functioning of your board. So to summarize, I think there's 5 key elements that we talked about. One element has to do with the amount of, or the kind of recruiting that you do to get people onto your boards and where to recruit from. The second one has to do with the training that we do for our board members before they join, when they join, before they join basically by only getting board members that have already been pre-trained, when they join by onboarding, after they join by constant training. Then we talked about succession planning, make sure that we have the right succession planning in place. We also talked about making sure that we do proper board evaluation. And lastly, we talked about higher levels of board governance. We use some examples as well of getting a board advisor, if it's your patron or someone else, to make sure the board has somebody they can talk to or somebody that can talk to it about how to improve governance. Competency for good governance really starts with making sure that we have competent board members in all the different competencies that we require. And I want to close the way I started, which is to say, if we want to have a strong nonprofit sector in Singapore, we need strong boards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fermin. And thank you so much once again, Teresa, for your really insightful sharings, passion for the mission, as well as competency for good governance. We shall now move into the panel discussion. Joining us this afternoon, besides Fermin and Teresa, we are indeed very privileged to have with us as well Ms. Stephanie Tang, who is the President of Breast Cancer Foundation, and Mr. Glenn Ong, the Executive Director of the Girls Brigade Singapore. So before we move deep into the questions itself, may I invite Glenn to just give us a little introduction about yourself and the Girls Brigade Singapore before we move on to Stephanie. Glenn?
Hi everyone, thanks Kitson. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Glenn. I work with the Girls Brigade Singapore. As you know, the Girls Brigade is a movement for young people, particularly girls, of course. And we work with girls from the age of 5, perhaps in K1 and K2, all the way till they are in post-secondary school years of their life. So that's pretty much what we do. We partner a lot with the Ministry of Education. And I've been here for not too long, for just about 2 years. But most of my life I've spent it in leadership and boards of faith-based organizations. And now, in the last decade or so, transiting into a space where there is practical service as well to community and to impact that space. So yeah, it's been a pleasure so far.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Let's hear from Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so for myself, very much so, I have been on I come from the private sector, and I have actually served on the non-profit boards. I was serving on the East Coast, the cooperative under the Ministry of Home Affairs for 10 years before I came onto the EXCO of Breast Cancer Foundation. I joined Breast Cancer Foundation first as a on the subcom for fundraising before getting into the board after about 6 months. And then I took on as president of Breast Cancer Foundation from 1st Jan last year. So Breast Cancer Foundation for us, basically we have 2 pillars for our work. One is advocacy, to drive greater awareness, to raise the awareness for breast cancer in Singapore, as well as for us on the program side, which is to serve the Breast Cancer Foundation, breast cancer community here. So basically, I work closely with the management team, to drive the strategies and alongside with my board.
Right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Let's start off with a very interesting question. And, often it's been said that without passion, it's hard to do something that's really meaningful and purposeful. I believe I heard a bit about this from Teresa earlier on as well. And to what extent do you agree or disagree on this saying, and why? Maybe let's not hear from Teresa. Let's hear from Glenn first, shall we?
I was hoping someone else would. No, just kidding. I think I'm not sure whether I'm being controversial to the topic or not, but I think both passion and competency can be built and can be kind of like developed in a person. But yeah, I think without passion, it might be harder to bring yourself to do something. But like what Teresa mentioned, I think if you're purposeful and you have a sense of what you can contribute, I think you can still make a difference. Yeah.
Right, Glenn, we are not asking you to score points between Fermin and Teresa, but no worries. Let's perhaps hear from Stephanie. What are your thoughts on this then?
For me, I would say that a passionate board member would go just beyond attending meetings to get updates or to ask questions. It's really extending our resourcefulness and leads to offer solutions, to initiate new ideas and projects with our own personal commitment to see the project through, or to take on issues to resolve for the management and the organization. So it is, really beyond just giving that 2 hours of board meeting time or, meeting up at subcom meet.
Well, it's often, it's true that, between the 2 hours and all, but how do you really measure passion?
I think it is, for me, it would be really taking on that it is a responsibility, passion must come with, like what Teresa has rightfully said, there must be that purpose. And I would also see it as a responsibility to the organization that we serve, to the cause that we have committed ourselves to.
Right. Teresa, you have anything to add to this?
Well, I'm not sure about measuring passion, but whether you're passionate or not is visible to other people. Yeah, and whether you're faking passion or not is also visible to other people. I mean, do you go the extra mile to do things? Do you push the envelope on things? Do you pursue objectives even when the tough gets going? Yeah, when you do things like that, people will say, hey, you never give up. Your passion is really very innate. Yeah, but if you just do something because it's nice to do, easy to do, people will know, right? And I'm not sure whether I call that passion. I'll just call that sociability. Yeah, it's a different category altogether. Yeah, and passion will really mean nothing without purpose. Yeah. Which is why I put passion and purpose together. like in my case, I really eat and breathe leadership. Yeah. So when my term with NVPC ended, straight away SID invited me, and I said yes, I will do the same under the SID umbrella. Yeah. And under the SID umbrella, you know, I still continue to work with CNPL, I work with SSI, and I work with many other institutions that are providing non-profit training. Yeah, because I believe in going the extra mile. Yeah, and there's really no end to passion. Yeah, there's really no end. It really depends on how far you want to go. But what's important is bringing others along. Yeah, because if you're running yourself, if you're running at your own speed because you're passionate, everybody would be wondering, is that a mad lady, you know? So it's important to bring everybody along. And again, that's where purpose comes in. I got to do it together.
Right. Thank you, Teresa. Well, for all of us attending this webinar right now, if you do have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A function or in the chat room. And I'll be happy to surface these questions that you have. Well, Fermin did mention about tools earlier in regards to competencies. And there is this question as well. How would you assess if a board member has passion for the mission? Are there any thoughts on this, Fermin?
Passion for the mission is important, to be honest. But I beg to differ with everybody else, I guess, on the panel. I think a lot of people want to contribute to society, and it's a very generic sort of idea that they want to contribute to Singapore and to society in whatever way they can. And if the mission of the organization is elderly or disabled or whatever, you know, a lot of the people that want to join the boards are not so necessarily always focused that it needs to be this or it needs to be that. I find that sometimes this passion grows once they join the board, as opposed to they need to have it before they join the board. So I think it's an important consideration to make, that you don't always need to find people who are already passionate about your cause before you bring them onto the board. What you want to make sure is that people who are passionate about your cause. So a lot of that happens once they join. A lot of that can be while they're there. That's part of the training that I think it's important to do. That's part of the onboarding that I think it's important to do. So how to measure the passion? It will have a lot more to do with how much time they're willing to spend. So if I were going to put a very practical and pragmatic approach to how to measure passion, each board member will spend as little or as much time as they are passionate about. Of course, they are busy and they have their own busy lives and they're doing something else. But if I'm truly passionate, when I was on the board of the charity that I was in, one of the things that I want to be able to do is volunteer. I was actually volunteering when I could at some of the places where we had our beneficiaries. And you start doing that on your own. You start doing that, not just that you're going to spend more time in training or more time in the committee, is that you start spending more time with the organization doing things. So that's how I would actually measure that passion. I would measure it by seeing how committed people are to spending additional time on organizational related matters.
Yeah, and I would advise you know, anyone who is considering whether they even want to get into the sector as a volunteer. There are 4 questions you want to ask yourself. Yeah, what do you love doing? That's the first question. Secondly, are you good at it? Yeah, and thirdly, is anyone else going to benefit from it other than yourself? Yeah, and the 4th question is, what sort of value does it add to you eventually? Are you going to grow as a result of doing something? Yeah, if you're not going to grow, don't do it. Yeah, so try to answer these 4 questions, and you would be in a good starting point at least. Yeah. You will learn to like what you do much better. Yeah, if you don't already like it.
Thanks, Teresa. I think these 4 questions are really indeed very, very important and lovely. And this also goes back to the point that Stephanie raised, that it goes beyond the 2-hour meetings. And that's what Fermin mentioned as well, to the, you know, that you need to volunteer and you need to be involved in the charity. Maybe let's hear from the Girls Brigade, Glenn. What are some ways on how you measure the passion of your board members? Is it convenient to share?
Yeah, sure. I think it starts also before they become board members, like some of my fellow panelists have mentioned. I think one of the would be just measuring their level of pre-existing commitments is really important. So what are they already on a personal level spending their time and resources on? I think that's actually a good gauge. Are they already spending their time and resource on a similar cause that you are on? Or are they already within your organization and they're volunteering their time with you for a period of time? So that's probably something that we really look out for in terms of their passion. But alternatively, I think there could be also passion for just wanting to make the nonprofit sector, reach its fullest potential. There could be passion not so much for the cause, but also to see nonprofits excel in what they do, become excellent in governance, so that they can, make a greater impact. And I think even that kind of passion is good passion. Yeah, it might not be for the cause and the work, but even having that heart is something that we can really look out for. Yeah, because there can also be wrong passions, right? You're very passionate, and some people are very passionate, like for the Girls Brigade. We are 95 years old next year in Singapore. And so there might be people who are very passionate about what we stand for, the uniform we wear, the colors we love, maybe a little bit more so than the actual work that we do. So I think there's that kind of measure where there is slightly wrong kind of passion for maybe board work. But yeah, I think this is something that we must be very honest with ourselves when we come to measure. So yeah, it's just probably a couple of things that we look out for.
I think I would call that emotional passion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stephanie, you have anything to add to this?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're talking about this passion. There is a question that is very interestingly put: is how do you tell a genuine potential board member from one that's a personal agenda? That goes a bit about, like what Glenn mentioned earlier on as well. So being personable, articulate are the usual plus until the person gets on board. So which of you like to take this question on board?
Well, I would say this goes into the selection of your board member. There is you can follow the science and the art of selection. And the science tells you that there are certain processes that you have to go through. Yeah, so for example, having behavioral interviews. Yeah, putting this board member under an interview situation where you talk about and you talk about past track record. What was your track record in doing good? Yeah, so that's a behavioral interview. And there's something about in the future, if we need this, how can you commit? And can we nail you down to all this kind of commitment? Yeah, so that's the science of it, doing proper interviews. You can also do reference checks. Yeah, check around a few people. Singapore is so small. They will be able to tell you, is this person all about himself, herself, or does this person do something for others? Yeah, so take that accountability upon yourself. Yeah, and not point the finger at the other person and say, hey, is this person a selfish person or not? It is really up to you to find out. And that is your accountability as a present board member, to bring the right people on board.
How about Fermin? Your thoughts on this?
I totally agree with Teresa that if you want to bring the right people on board, first of all, expand your horizons, look elsewhere. Don't just look at your current networks. But beyond that, make sure that you have clarity around what skill sets you need on the board. And third is, make sure that you're going to bring somebody that will fit not just the passion for the cause, as we said earlier, but that fits the working of the board, that will complement the skill sets that you have on the board, that will add a new dimension to your board around something that is important to your organization. So have clarity around the competencies required, which is really what I was talking about earlier, and bring people onto the board that will add to the depth and the breadth of the board's ability to deliver for the organization.
Right, for me, I'd like to just push a little bit further because you mentioned about skill sets and competencies. Now, in your opinion, what do you think are the most important competencies a general board member should have before you admit them onto a board? Would it be strategic planning, succession planning, problem solving, or what are these competencies that is, is a die must have?
Die must have a strategy. In my point of view, my esteemed panel members may disagree on this one, but I would go with strategy. Die also must have is an understanding of how funding works, and how then to manage the finances of the organization in a way that works around not just revenue generation, but funding, sources of funding, and how it all works. And I think it's all really important that everybody understands governance. I mean, there's just not getting around this. Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's hear from the rest of the panelists. Teresa.
Okay, I just saw a research by Stanford University on what's the latest in non-profit competencies. And they did talk about 2 skills that are a minimum for directors. Yeah, whether you're coming in to serve on from a financial angle or a HR angle or the audit angle. The first one is strategic savviness. Yeah, so Fermin is right there. You do really need to have the talent to look at the big picture, to join the dots, to look at the big landscape. What are the challenges? What are the emergent challenges, as well as what others are doing about these challenges. And the second one is actually digital savviness. Yeah. Now this is where our charity sector is a little bit weak, but this is becoming like a mandatory skill for all directors. Yeah, almost mission critical in their opinion. Yeah, granted, maybe we are 2-3 years behind the US in the charity sector, but given 2-3 years, I think all our board directors must learn to be digital savvy. Yeah, whether it's automating the programs or really just efficiency tools or communications tools. Yeah, I think these would be the 2 minimum ones. Yeah, and the rest we are talking about functional expertise, and that's what you're brought in for in many cases.
Interesting. Maybe let's hear from Stephanie.
Well, I totally agree with both Fermin and Teresa, but I think digital savviness, this would be quite a big challenge for a lot of the board directors now. So I think it's really how we, what is out there for them to upgrade, because not many of them in their own day job or own work get into that sector. I mean, I do have board members who tell me that I don't look into social media. I don't even have my own social media, be it LinkedIn even. And I think that would be quite difficult, because if we are now talking about, pushing even fundraising on the online platform, etc., then getting them even to click on their WhatsApp to share and tell their friends to make donation. They don't even know how to do that. I think that's tough. So I think it is important. I mean, it is important, and that is what we want to encourage as well.
Yeah. And when I talk about digital savviness, I'm not talking about possessing the technical skills or being being comfortable with technology alone.
Openness to it.
I'm talking about how you view things through the digital world. Behind every click, what is there? There's a lot of manipulation in social media. There's a lot of manipulation behind social marketing, and that can affect you in the way you look at things, in the way you make decisions. Yeah, and if you're digital savvy, you will see the manipulation behind all this information that you're getting. You will be able to discern ethically. You will also be able to discern objectively, because whatever you think about information ultimately is going to lead to decisions. Yeah, and if all of us are directors who are misled by all this technology out there, we will end up making similar kind of decisions that has been manipulated by technology. Yeah, so I'm really talking about that as well, the impact that digitization has on us and the way we think. And the way we think leads to the kind of decisions we make. So it's all this biasness and conditioning that we have to be careful about. Yeah, not just the ability to navigate social media and LinkedIn and 1001 digital applications. That's just one part of it. The other part is the effect it has on our thinking as decision makers.
Well said, Teresa. In fact, a board makes a lot of decisions. We've heard from Fermin, Teresa, Stephanie on strategy, finance, governance, digital. Maybe let's hear from the management point of view. Glenn, what happens if your board lacks these competencies as mentioned by Fermin, Teresa, and Stephanie? How?
Yeah, I think this is where then we have to make sure that the management team is actually very savvy on this. And I think who you take in on your management teams and your senior management becomes very, very important. That boards and of course the EDs are very conscious in spotting the mega trends, spotting the needs of what the current situation and landscape is all about, and making hiring recommendations based on that. Probably that's going to be a very big thing. And I guess for the management side of stuff, it's also constantly being the reminder that the sector can professionalize, which is actually very difficult. I think it's a moving trend where we've heard so much from NCSS as well that we want to professionalize the sector a little bit more. And I think this is where the management teams can really come in. So with strong boards and to have strong sector, it also requires strong management team. Yeah, and we do play a reminding role as well to boards who may not have that mindset or that competency or that organizational development capability. And I think it's a dance. So someone needs to take the lead at different times and seasons of an organization. Yeah.
That's the reason why you see NCSS SID comes in together with us, for this very important webinar.
That's right.
And SID, please.
Yes, SID as well. I did mention that.
So you have all been very helpful to us, at least to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess this is a very interesting sector. We can't do it alone, and basically all of us play a very important role to ensure that there's equality on the boards, there's equality in the sector, and then we can excel together. Now, this interesting question that Fermin also mentioned earlier part was that, you have board members that join the board and the passion grows. Now, on the contrary, sometimes we do hear that over time, this flame diminishes and the passion dies off. So how do we actually sustain this passion on the boards and to ensure that these board members do not lose heart over time due to various reasons? Maybe Fermin like to share with us? Or Teresa? Teresa's smiling there.
Teresa going first.
Okay, what happens when passion diminishes? I think it's all right. There's a life cycle that everyone goes through. Yeah. So when your passion diminishes, you've got to sit back and answer the 4 questions again. What do you love doing? Are you good at it? Does it benefit someone other than yourself? And are you adding value to yourself? If you are not adding value to yourself anymore, it's likely you have contributed to the earlier passion already. And it's time to move on and find another passion. Yeah. So again, I would go back to these 4 questions and ask myself. Yeah. And it's perfectly all right. You can't be passionate about the same thing all the time. Yeah. And I'm sure along the way you will find other areas of interest to keep you motivated. But if your passion is because you're giving up, because the tough, when the tough gets going, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. Then if the reason is because you're giving up, then perhaps your passion wasn't really passion in the first place. It was just an interest that you're pursuing. And you found out that, hey, perhaps I'm not interested in it anymore. Yeah. So again, self-examine. Was it really passion at the start? Perhaps it's not. It's just you finding your way, finding your meaning in life, finding your purpose. And it's just not that. So that's fine. Move on. Yeah. For me, sorry.
Yeah, two answers to that. One I already mentioned, which is part of the board's responsibility is to make sure that people stay engaged. And that engagement, if the board is doing this purposefully, as opposed to just letting each member do it by themselves and assuming that the passion is there, if you are doing it purposefully, then you're thinking of ways in which to continuously re-engage your board members with the cause. But I think Teresa's right. Things come and go, and it's okay. Then my second answer to this question is make sure you have tight governance. That after a board term, that's it. It's time to say, okay, I go do something else, and the board finds somebody else, and everybody happy this way. Part of the problem we have is that we bring board members for life almost. It's like and because of that, then we feel that everybody must be passionate until the end of time. That's not necessarily true.
Yeah, and the latest research on purpose is that we don't just have one purpose. We have many purposes, and they intertwine between our work life and our personal life. They fit into each other until one or two great purpose surface. Yeah. So it's all right. Yeah, you can have a few purposes, and one of it will sustain for the longer term, and that would be your identity. And your identity should transcend your work life and your personal life. It should be the same. You cannot be purposeful at work and not in your personal life. It should be the same behavior.
Yeah, I think I fully agree that there is a season for everything, and there's no season that's always full on for everybody. I think apart from the life circumstances that we cannot control sometimes, I guess there is something that we can control as boards and management would be, I think what we've experienced is nothing kills passion more quickly than a mismatch of competencies, actually, where they feel that they are in a role that's too big for them and they don't know how to contribute, or the organization grows to an extent where their old skills are no longer relevant, or it's not enough to fulfill that true role of what a board member should be. I think then that's where things start to fade as well. And perhaps that's where, if we are able to work on that matching and work on that training, it will extend the lifespan of some of our folks as well. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's really one is the individual where they, because of family or other circumstances, they lose their passion. But as a board, I think sometimes people have been placed into the wrong subcom, and they don't feel that they are able to contribute. Initially, they take on because they just join and they feel that this is something they can do, but actually it is really not their forte. And staying on for the whole term kind of it can also demoralize them, and that's where they start to lose their passion. So I think matching is also important, and I think for me it would really also getting them out there to attend the relevant development training courses. I feel that as good has been very good for me. I completed the whole course, and now that I brought new board members, some with experience, some without. For those, this could be their first time in the non-profit, I do encourage them, and I look at the schedule, and I get the management team to actually share with them so that they could actually join, because this is something that is really useful for them.
Right, thank you. I also recall Teresa did mention her earlier days being a new board member. There wasn't any training, or even learning development programs and such that we have today. And in the essence of time for this panel, maybe we'll just take one last question. And this is also related to passion and competency. For board members who are passionate but lack the competencies, and I combine this with another question as well. Sometimes board members feel obligated to take on certain roles. They are passionate, they take on the roles, but they may not be competent. I think that also links back to what Stephanie has mentioned earlier on. So how can my organization support and equip them with these necessary skill sets? And who can we approach?
You only need one thing: sign up for S-Good. Yeah, it's coming up soon. Yes, that is the only answer from my perspective.
No, that's very true.
Same answer.
I second that.
Okay,
I've already
yeah.
gotten 2 of my board members to sign up for some of the coming on sessions.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think so. As a beneficiary of it all, I can attest that of its effectiveness, and it's really good. I think it's so rare to find the right people in the right place with the right voices as well. So I think this has always been a good opportunity. Yeah.
Well, we know Glenn and Stephanie, both of you have attended the S-Good program. Is there something you'd like to share about very briefly about this program before we end off this panel discussion?
Well, I've completed a whole session. I was initially a little bit disappointed when there were not enough attendees, and then some of the classes had to be postponed. But nevertheless, I think last year with the COVID, all of us could actually get online, and that was fantastic. I feel that each of the topics are very useful, and it gives us a very broad base. We look at everything on a very macro level as well. So it actually, gets me more excited every time I finish each topic, because I learn new things. And when I go back into working with the organization and the management team, there are new ideas and new inputs that I can offer. That would be, really for me. I am a strong advocate for this.
Thank you, Stephanie. Glenn?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things for myself would be, and perhaps in our organization, as nonprofits, we sometimes can become very isolated, very insular, and we base everything on our past experience, and we don't get a chance to benchmark with others and what perhaps is really going on in the sector and industry. And so S-Good actually opened that opportunity for us to really want to, be there and gain something from it. As a senior manager a number of years ago, I wanted to go for the program, but cannot, right? But now having this privilege to have gone through that program, I really do appreciate it. And also for boards and for management team, it helps you to have a second voice for change within your organization. I think that is very, very important, and no amount, yes, okay, perhaps money can buy it, but not in this way, where there is this whole collective that's available at the same time, able to speak into someone else's life and mind, which you may not have that voice to do so, and that's important. Yeah.
I'll add one more. I think S-Good is not just false. It's not just self. I think it is also the network, not just our own learning, but the got to meet so many people from the sector, getting to hear their issues as well, because all of us, we talk about it, and I think that is important. And I would say that to know Teresa, she opens every of the session most times, and so. And when I do have a problem, I know these are the people I can also reach out to, and she has been really, really helpful, and supportive for my role at Breast Cancer Foundation as well. Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
Lovely. Thank you so much. So you can definitely see that the S-Good program not only caters to the competencies and the passion, but it also involves a lot in networking. And maybe let's end off this session with a few words of encouragement from Teresa and then Fermin.
Okay, my word of encouragement, I would say yes. Look into yourself, find your passion. If you can't find your passion, sign up for S-Good and you'll find your passion. And do enjoy the journey with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Fermin.
My point is a bit different. What I would like to see, and if I have a vision, it would be much more about how can you help your board to become an exemplary board? How do you help your board to become the board that other boards are looking at saying, oh, I want my board to be like that. So don't just focus on the organization, which as well you should. But like I said earlier, you should spend part of the time focusing on the organization, but part of the time focusing on the board itself. So if I have one word of encouragement is make your board the best board in all of Singapore.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Fermin. Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Glenn, for joining us on this Leaders Lab panel discussion this afternoon. And basically, passion and competency are both very important and necessary topics where the boards look for when they bring on board new members. More importantly, boards must continue to engage and support their board members in building their governance competency and passion for the mission. So at this juncture, I also like to share with you part of your learning and development journey as board members and directors. And SID, the Singapore Institute of Directors, together with the Social Service Institute, NCSS, and CNPL has come together to also help you out in your directorship journey. So some of you may already know we conduct the SYN for short. So you want to be a non-profit director program 2 times a year. All right, and that is basically an introductory course to your roles as a director in the non-profit sector. And this is under the As Good Fundamentals. And as you journey on, you need to acquire certain directorship competencies as well as some future-ready skills. So the As Good program that Glenn and Stephanie were talking about earlier this afternoon falls under our As Good Essentials program. And another piece of good news is that when you sign up for the As Good program, 8 modules, you are also entitled to a STAR mentoring program. And this is actually a new program that is jointly and supported by the Tote Board. So we recognize that competencies and passions are important, but perhaps sometimes you need that phone call away. Perhaps sometimes you need a mentor to guide you along that journey. So that is also provided for As Good alumni or participants of the As Good programs. And of course, through SID, SSI, CNPL, we also have the As Good focus programs, as well as the Leaders Lab, a session similar to what we have this afternoon. And another piece of good news, we have a new book by Teresa, Leading for Good. Yeah, so she has, and this book will be out by end of March. So please get your hands on the copy of this book. Now, the good news is for the first 50 registrants who sign up for this As Good, at least 3 essential modules will get the book free. You can ask for the autograph after this. I'll let you discuss with her. All right. So as part of the journey, we really hope that you can consider to sign up for this program to enhance our skills. Now, at this juncture, I would like to invite Mr. Ryan, the head of membership and engagement of SID, to share with us on this new service, which is called the Board Match Premium Service. Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Kitson. Hello, everyone, and a very good afternoon. My name is Ryan, and I'm from SID membership team. All right, let me just try to control this. The Singapore Institute of Directors is the National Association of Company Directors, and our mission is to foster good governance and ethics in corporate leadership. CNPL is currently offering the board match service at no cost to MPOs looking for board or committee members. I'm pleased to inform that SID is working with CNPL to offer a new service called the Board Match Premium Service. This will help to extend the pool of qualified candidates for the available role that you have. SID has an extensive directory of directors who are willing to serve as independent directors on board. Our directors have the depth and breadth of technical competencies and experiences in diverse range of backgrounds, and a lot of them do have connections to potential donors as well. So with our CDP requirements and comprehensive training curriculum, we ensure that our members are always kept abreast of the latest development and are developed professionally as well. Okay, let's take a look at the rates applicable. The Board Match Premium rate is applicable for referrals made through CNPL, and these are affordably charged. If you decide to embark on the Board Match Premium service, there will be a one-off admin fee of $150 applicable. And upon successful placement of a candidate in a committee or board position, there will be a success fee of $750 applicable. SID has a high rate of success in placing our directors onto board positions, and I believe we will be able to do the same for your organization as well. Now, I'd like to bring your attention to this membership promotion that we are offering to all those attending today's session. With this membership, with our MPO membership, you will be able to save on the board match premium service. If you just sign up before 31st of March, you will enjoy up to 25% off a 5 or 3 year membership. And you will also get to enjoy 2 times waiver of admin fees for the board match premium service. What's more, you will also receive 2 additional training vouchers so you want to be a non-profit director, worth about $181 per session. And if you do sign up for 3 years, there will be a complimentary publication, and this would be the Boardroom Matters box set worth $108. In addition, for all NPOs, we will also be giving you annual training benefits, as well as membership fee savings in the form of waiver of individual membership entrance fee for board and council members who are interested to join as individual members. This is a very attractive offer, and I would like to encourage all of you to take up this offer today. Now, to sign up, all you need to do is download the application form from our website, sid.org.sg, indicate CMPL promo on the top of the form, and submit it by the 31st of March. If you have any questions, you can email us at membership@sid.org.sg. And for the board match premium service, you can contact CMPL directly at peoplesearch@cmpl.org.sg. That's all I have for you today, and I look forward to potentially working with some of you in the near future for the board match premium service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Indeed, this is a suite of good news for our MPOs. Never once we had so many learning and development programs, networking sessions, as well as the ability to learn along the way as well. And all this really grateful to the Singapore Institute of Directors, as well as the Social Service Institute of NCSS, for providing all this. So we have now come to the end of the webinar. But before we end, I would just like to remind all panelists, as well as the organizing team, to just stay back after this for a photo taking session. And for the rest of us, just feel free to approach any one of us at CMPL for all board advisory matters, or any of the learning and development programs. Do contact the Singapore Institute of Directors. Until we see each other again, either virtually or physically, I wish you all the best, and please continue to stay well, stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
See
you,
you all.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.